Hi everyone, welcome back to this channel, and in today's presentation we are going to discuss about the stems. This video is part of a series called The Anatomy of the Plant, and this is last video in this series. This slide shows you the topics that are going to be discussed in this presentation today. The content are going to be discussed briefly to provide a general idea about the subject. Firstly, we are going to begin by a brief summary of stem and provide an introductory background into this subject. Most of the wood that we use in our households or workspaces, directly or indirectly, involves the plant stem. There's a process known as grafting, which usually involves artificially uniting stems or parts of stems of different but related varieties of plants. This allows for the regeneration of a new stem. This has been practiced by humans for many years. Some plants have the ability to grow indefinitely over the years, and this is called indeterminate growth. The meristems at the tip of the plant allows for them to keep increasing in length. In stems, the cells produced by the meristems usually become the familiar, erect, aerial shoot system with branches and leaves. The stem can be widespread in nature. It can be short and inconspicuous as to appear non-existent. In a number of plants, stems are modified in ways that allow specialized functions, such as climbing or the storage of food or water. This next part of the presentation is going to discuss about the external form of a wood twig. Leaves can be arranged on a stem in three ways. Firstly, if the spiral around the stem, then they are called alternately arranged. Secondly, if the leaves appear to be attached in pair on the twig, then they are oppositely arranged. Lastly, if they appear to be in clusters or in groups, then we refer to them a whorl. The area, or region of a stem where a leaf or leaves are attached is called a node, and a stem region between nodes is called an internode. A leaf usually has a flattened blade, and in most cases is attached to the twig by a stalk called the petiole. The angle between the petiole and the stem will contain a bud, and this angle is known as the axil. The bud is actually located in the axil, the crevices of the angle, and it's called axillary bud. Next, we are going to look at the origin and the development of stem. The apical meristem is a region where the tissues in this area are actively dividing, and it's present at the tip of each stem. The apical meristem is dormant before the growing season begins. It is protected by bud scales of the bud in which it is located, and also to a certain extent by leaf primordia, the tiny embryonic leaves that will develop into mature leaves after the bud scales drop off and growth begins. When a bud begins to expand or a seed germinates, the cells of the apical meristem undergo mitosis, and soon three primary meristems develop from it. The outermost of these primary meristems, the protoderm, gives rise to the epidermis. The epidermis will develop into a single cell thick and will gradually become coated with a thin waxy layer, which will act as a protective barrier. This waxy layering is called cuticle. The remainder of the meristematic tissue, called ground meristem, produces two tissues composed of parenchyma cells. The parenchyma tissue in the center of the stem is the pith. Pith cells tend to be very large and may break down shortly after they are formed. The other tissue produced by the ground meristem is the cortex. The cortex may become more extensive than the pith, but in woody plants, it, too, eventually will be crushed and replaced by new tissues produced from within. This part of the video will briefly discuss about the various tissue patterns in stem. These are the only two patterns being discussed today in the presentation, but there are more as well in nature. We are going to begin by talking about steles. The stele is composed of primary xylem, primary phloem, and the pith. The simplest form of stele is referred to as protostele. The present-day flowering plants have eusteles prevalently, in which the primary xylem and primary phloem are in discrete vascular bundles. These vascular bundles have already been discussed in the part 1 of this series. Next, we are going to look at the herbaceous dicotyledonous stem, and this diagram shows a better picture in terms of capturing whole concept of the tissue arrangements. Herbaceous dicot stems have a discrete vascular bundles composed of patches of xylem and phloem. The vascular bundles are arranged in a cylinder that separates the cortex from the pith, although in a few they are produced as continuous rings instead of in separate bundles. Lastly, we are going to talk about only three forms of specialized stems, and they are rhizomes, tubers, and bulb. Many species of plants have evolved to create specialized stems that have been modified to aid in the survival of the plant. There are many forms of specialized stem that exist in nature, and some of them are tuber, rhizome, runner, bulb, and corm. However, in this presentation we are only going to be discussing three of them. Rhizomes are horizontal stems that grow below ground, often near the surface of the soil. Adventitious roots are produced all along the rhizome, mainly on the lower surface, and more details about this are present in the second part of this series. Rhizomes can be thick, fleshy, they can also carry out to be food storage organs, they can be slender as seen in some ferns. The first thing that comes to mind when we hear about tubers is potato. The potato plants have several internodes at the tips of stolon which become tubers as they swell from the accumulation of food. The mature tuber becomes isolated after the stolon to which it was attached dies. The eyes of the potato are actually nodes formed in a spiral around the thickened stem. Bulbs are mainly larger buds which are surrounded by fleshy leaves with a small stem at the lower end. Adventitious roots grow from the bottom of the stem, but the fleshy leaves comprise the bulk of the bulb tissue, which stores food. In onions, the fleshy leaves usually are surrounded by the scale-like leaf bases of long, green, above-ground leaves. Thank you for watching this video. There will be more of such videos posted every Friday. Please subscribe for more.